This is Chip Maxwell, and you're listening to the Retire Smart podcast with David Brooks. Is 72 the mandatory age for 401k withdrawal rules, or has it changed? What proactive moves is David making with his clients right now, while my current advisor reminds me to simply stay the course? David Brooks has answers to these questions in today's Q&A episode. Into the Q&A we go. David, the first question is about 401ks. Help me understand the mandatory 401k withdrawal rules. Is it still 72 or has that changed?
Okay, a couple of questions here. So if you're still working and you have money in a 401k and you're at your active job, you do not have to take a mandatory withdrawal as long as you're still working regardless of age. However, there is what's called a required minimum distribution. If you've left work and you left the 401k behind, or you have another 401k, an old 401k where you're not currently working, then yes, you are required to start RMDs, required minimum distributions. Now, there are four different ages for that. So 70 and a half if you were born prior to 1950. If you were born in 1950, then it would be 72 as the questioner asked. If you're born 1951 to 1959, then it would be at age 73. And if you're born in 1960 or later, it would be age 75. So are you confused? That's our government for you, right? But yes, requirement of distributions are still required, again. And you also need to understand the difference between 401k distributions and IRA distributions. You may have 3 different IRAs and a 401k, and if you're required to take distributions from all of those dollar amounts, the 401k cannot satisfy the IRA's distribution. The IRA's distribution cannot satisfy the 401k's distribution. However, one of the 3 IRAs could satisfy all 3 IRAs distributions. Again, isn't this easy?
Wow.
So that's why we say work with a competent professional who's going to build an income plan that's going to help you understand why you take income from which account, when, where, why, how to do the distributions, how to set it up. And the problem with most 401ks is they really don't have any. They just are going to blanket sell whatever's in the account to send you the distribution you're asking for. There's not going to, where inside an IRA, we could set up where we have an income part sleeve producing income assets to give you that income, and we could have a growth sleeve that never gets harmed or touched by those distributions.
If I started one of those accounts or converted it over time into a Roth, then at least my RMD would not be taxed, right?
Well, you don't. Great question. So, one, you would not have an RMD, requirement distribution, from a Roth.
Yeah, because you've already paid the tax.
You've already paid the tax, so you can keep it there. Correct.
Requirement.
And again, there's so much to go into this, but that's why I would tell you 90% of the clients that come in our door, we'll do Roth conversions before hitting RMD age, and about 50% of our clients get it completed. They don't have any money left. There is no RMDs because we did the proper planning on the front end. And again, we show you how to do this with the minimal tax liability we think you could pay in your lifetime. We're not telling you to just move it all, right, and blow your tax bill up. We just met with somebody who's like, yeah, I heard you talk about Roth conversion, so we did one. Didn't think about it, didn't got a very large tax bill they weren't expecting here come April because nobody did any pre-planning. And by the way, there are tax strategies to chip away at the tax that would be due on the Roth conversion. So now we show you how to do it with max efficiency. We can then show you tax strategies to actually chip away at that tax liability, even though it's reduced from the planning, to reduce it even further.
David, next question is about portfolio management. My wife and I have been listening to your show for a while. It seems that you look at investing differently than our advisor. He reminds us that over the long run, the markets go up, so stay the course. You keep talking about being proactive. What moves are you making with your clients right now? Now, David, we could do a whole show on this, so I'm going to ask you, just give us a few examples.
So one of the greatest investors of all time is a gentleman by the name of Ray Dalio. I've mentioned him before.
We quote him often on this show.
Yep. And so his hedge fund, Bridgestone, was one of the most successful ever. He's now basically retired, but runs a family office for his own money. I got to meet him along with Tony Robbins at a conference not that long ago. But Ray's a legend. But one of the things Ray talks about in his he's got a great book out there. By the way, I think he's giving it away free online, so you can just Google this. But he talks about if you have about 8 different investments that are not correlated to each other, that is how you reduce risk. In other words, you can reduce your risk by, according to Ray, I'm quoting Ray, up to 83%. And so we don't just want to buy stocks or bonds. And most advisors, hey, we're going to allocate, you got stocks and bonds, right? Offense and defense, if you will. And maybe they'll do a little commodities or something in there, and we sometimes refer to that as special teams. We always joke about football. The analogy is your equities, your stocks, or your offense trying to score you points. The bonds in your portfolio were typically the defense in your portfolio, a little more safe. And then sometimes you need the little guy on the end of the bench, this funny little guy who's got a heck of a leg, and you only need him every once in a while, but he's really important if you need a great punt or a great kick to win the game, or et cetera. And that sometimes is your alternative investments like commodities, et cetera. And so the problem is if you only have that allocation, stocks and bonds and cash, you only have really 2 or 3 asset classes. So what we do in our proactive approach is we're going to show you how to invest in 5 to 7, at least, typically different sleeves or models that are going to cover these different asset classes. And depending on the asset level of the client, this could include a little bit more sophisticated stuff, or it could keep it pretty simple. So the average retiree, we have a portfolio, we call it Smart CAR, kind of right, CAR, and that stands for commodities, alternatives, and real estate. So in other words, we're going to give clients exposure to these areas. And of course, what if commodities, at least the hard ones, so that portfolio, by being proactive, soft commodities have gotten crushed. Chip, crushed during this tariff war, right? That's cocoa, soy, sugar. Those things have gotten hurt. But hard commodities, precious metals, gold, silver, et cetera, platinum, uranium, have skyrocketed at points here. And so proactive means inside the model, we lean to where we think is the most likely to get a better return on a risk-adjusted basis. And then we take that same methodology across a stock portfolio, across a sector-built portfolio, across a absolute return portfolio, across a bond portfolio, et cetera. And then we also want clients to have some dollars that are safe inside on the sideline. Because the other thing is, the reality is, when the market drops down 20%, if you were to buy stocks and just not look for 10 years, you can't lose money. Can't do it. But if you were to only look 6 months out, certainly it could go lower. Even the market lower, we can go down 50%, right? So understanding where you're going to pull income from and building a portfolio that's not just a set it and forget it. And I crack up and these guys, set it and forget it. Yes, the idea is to stay invested in the long term. And Charlie Munger has a great quote. The only thing you don't want to do to compounding interest is interrupt it, right? You want to keep your dollars growing. But you also, at some point, will need income. So you have to pull a sleeve aside that is going to provide income. And that should have very little or no risk to it for the next year or 3 years. And then we have a moderate risk portfolio, and then we have aggressive stuff that is 7 or 10 years out. And again, if your advisor is not doing these things, you may be a great candidate to do what we call a report card, where we'll just show you. We'll give an evaluation. It's not a recommendation. It's just an evaluation. Here's where you are. Here's the things that we see. And if you want to talk to us about what it looks like to go any further than that, that's fine. If not, that's okay too.
I thought I had heard all of your analogies. I want to hit this again. So, off in this football-crazed state in which we live, offense is stocks, equities, a little more volatile, a little more risk, but more return. That's you're trying to score. Defense, bonds, the tortoise instead of the hare, the steady Eddie bond market. And then your special teams, those are the specialty investments that might, there might be a unique opportunity, but to know that and be aware of it and take advantage of it and capitalize on it in a timely fashion. Boy, you got to be working these portfolios. You got to be monitoring. I mean, we have all kinds of analytical tools and software programs to do that.
That's
so
my world from about 4:30 every morning to about 7:15 is
some
just
of the timestamps on your messages are a little alarming. Yeah, but
I always tell everybody, when you get hired here, you need to turn off the notifications on our team's messaging system, because your phone will start vibrating at 4 in the morning, because I have to get it out when I get it in front of me, and I don't like to wait. So.
Thank you for listening to the Retire Smart podcast with David Brooks. If you want to learn how to generate lifetime income, reduce your tax bill, and maintain your lifestyle in retirement, visit retiresmartpodcast.com. And make sure to subscribe to keep up with new episodes every week.